Hello, ladies. Welcome to my podcast, The Period Podcast by Tammy Lachelle. I am so excited to be venturing out on this new journey and bringing awareness to something that is affecting our community. And when I say community, I'm specifically speaking to the community of Black women, but all women as a whole are being affected. But I have to be authentic and I have to be real when it comes down to just the statistics and everything within our community where we're being impacted and where we're feeling this the most. It needs to be, it has to be a conversation. There has to be an awareness that's brought front and center. So, without further ado, this episode is episode 1. It is called The Miseducation of Periods. The Miseducation of Periods. And we're basically going to break this down to into a couple of sessions where we're just debunking some myths and just talking about our periods and what they mean to us. What we thought, when we first got our periods, like how did our mindset change from when we got our periods as young adolescents to how do we feel or view our periods now? So what motivated me to do this podcast, right, is I want to say about 5 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I started to get very, very heavy periods and very extreme cramping when my cycles came down. And that was not always a thing for me. Like I would get periods, I would get my period and things like that, and I'll go through that whole 5 day, 3 or 4 day thing where I craved sugar and I ate all these things and had a little cramp here and there, and then those days will pass, my period will be over. Well, for the past, like I said, 4 or 5 years, I started to have excruciating cramps, so bad to where um if I was working a job, I would have to take off work. um I couldn't do normal activities. I was going through maybe 7 to 10 pads a day. And on top of that, I'm doubling my pads. I don't feel secure enough to just put one pad on, so I'm putting 2 pads on at a time. They're super pads, they're overnight pads. I can't do regular pads at all. I'm bleeding all over the place. I'm messing up my panties. I'm messing up my clothes. Sometimes I'm going out and getting things on my clothes. I'm getting embarrassed, or I'm going to sleep and waking up and my sheets are, messed up and just things like that, right? And I don't know, I never really thought about it too much. I didn't ever overthink it. I just thought, well, maybe this is normal. That's just what I kind of thought. And I just went about my day. I went about those years. Well, about 3 years ago, you know, um, I guess I got to the point where I just felt, this is not right. Something is not right. So I made my first OBGYN appointment to talk about these issues. Not my first OBGYN appointment, guys, but my first OBGYN appointment where I would bring this conversation up with my doctor. Right. And so, I go in to see my OBGYN. He was a male. And a male doctor, a male physician, and I kind of, start explaining to him what's kind of been going on with me and things like that. And he says to me, he says, "Well, you know what, girl?" He was like, "Did you know that ibuprofen?" Because I had to back it up a little bit. I had like I was passing massive clots. Okay. I would pass massive clots, like big old globbery, big old things, right? And I took pictures of them, and I showed it to him, and he just kind of looked at it and bypassed it. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you know what, girl? Did you know if you take like ibuprofen a couple of days before you know that your cycle is coming on, that, that stops you from clotting? He said that'll clear that up. Ibuprofen, stops you from clotting. It stops you from heavy bleeding. And he was like, just take about 4 of them, and that'll equal like prescription strength, and that'll help you out just fine. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, or, another option you can do. He was like, you can always get a hysterectomy. I mean, he's like, you're in your 30s, and, you have kids already. There's really no use for your uterus. You can just get a hysterectomy, and that'll take care of it. You don't have to worry about periods and none of that stuff. And he was like, so if you want to, talk about that, we can schedule you in so we can talk about it. And I just was completely thrown off. I was completely thrown off. I felt like I was not taken seriously. And I just felt like, why just try to take my uterus? Why just try to say take ibuprofen now? At the time, he did have me sold on the ibuprofen. He had me so much to the point where when I left the doctor's office that day, I left with mixed feelings and emotions. One thing I knew, that I was not going back to him again. It just didn't sit well with me, with the recommending the hysterectomy, and just bringing up the fact that you're in your 30s, and you've had kids. You don't need your uterus. No man, no anybody should tell a woman what to do with her body. And so to suggest that, instead of really listening to me, because I wanted to ask him, if I were my counterpart, would you have suggested that she doesn't need her uterus, that let's just take it out? I highly doubt it. Like, I do not think that this is what you're telling to um, your other patients who are, of a different ethnicity from me, and I know this for a fact. So I went home with that in mind. I knew, like, okay, look, I'm not going to him no more. I'm going to find me another doctor, somebody who's going to listen to me, hear me out, blah, blah, blah. So, months went by, and I actually took his advice with the ibuprofen. I started to take the ibuprofen. I was popping those ibuprofen. But the thing was, they were getting addictive because, I would never be able to catch it. Like days before my period, like he suggested. I think I did it one time, but I would never catch it because I was never really savvy like that with the periods. I'm way more savvy than I am now. Like, I'm like really detailed, know when they're coming on, know around that time I have my prep kits for my period and different things like that. But at that time, I wasn't as savvy and as on point and as detailed, because life was just moving so fast. To be honest with you guys, it wasn't until COVID happened that I actually slowed down and started to pay attention to every component of my being. I started to pay attention to my spirit, my soul, my body, my mind, my relationships, my finances. I started to pay attention to everything, because I think at that time when COVID was going on, life seemed so fragile. Life seemed like it could be, okay, your life can be taken away in an instance. There were so many people dying and getting sick to the point of death that, you had no choice but to stop and appreciate the life that you were still here. And what can I do to better my quality of life? So that, became my stance, and that motivated me, to seek out answers that I was looking for. And so I tried the ibuprofen method. But what happened with that, it was like I was popping these things so much until one day I remember, because it was stopping the clotting and it was helping with the pain. But once that will wear off, I wouldn't get the clotting as much. I'm gonna say as much. or really at all. But I still was heavy bleeding. I still was having those excruciating pain, cramps. Whenever the ibuprofen would wear off, I would have to find myself taking them again and again and again. And it was at the point that I would be popping ibuprofen so much. So I would be so groggy, so sleepy, falling all over the place, not remembering things because I was just literally felt like I was drugging myself. And I was like, I don't want to do this. I've never been a person that likes medicine. I do not like medicine, and to each its own. I'm more of a I have a high tolerance for pain. I've always had a high tolerance for pain. I can deal with high levels of pain pretty much without needing something, unless it's a toothache, because that is like the worst pain to have if you guys have ever had one. So for that, I'm like, yeah, give me something, give me whatever. I need to take something for it right now, right? But with other things, I have a high tolerance of pain. I'll try natural things. I'll try, anything before I grab a medicine bottle. That's kind of been my method for years. But so I knew, I'm like, I don't want to keep taking this medicine, because with every medicine, there are side effects. So I'm like, I'm taking this for, my period pain, but it's not really helping. The issue is just kind of masking it for a while, right? And then, excuse me, what's going to happen when, what are going to be the long-term effects, and I know that some of the long-term effects of taking ibuprofen and things like that is they, cause liver damage. They mess up the lining of your stomach, and I don't want to be dealing with one problem and, hey, now there's this problem. So what is the solution? So I started thinking, I started looking for doctors at this point. I started looking for doctors, and I started to change my diet, without even thinking, without even knowing. I'm just like, I knew I wanted to go on the journey, like I said, um of just being well, right? So I started to change my diet um by adding in tons of fruits and vegetables. So that's one of the first things that I did. Um and I started to look for a female gynecologist. I said, you know what? I'm going to look for a female doctor, because I feel like a female will understand me. They'll better understand me. They'll know how to navigate this conversation with me. I'll feel more comfortable, because I really felt like I was brushed off by my male OBGYN. And so I'm like, I'm going to look for a female doctor. And then to take it a bit further, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to look for an African American, a black OBGYN, because then I really feel like she's going to, be able to relate to me and help me and all of those things, all of the above. And so, I remember making my appointment, well, searching for OBGYN, finding different ones, and just trying to find ones that were closest to, my home where I was located at, trying to find ones that, first of all, had great reviews. And so I was doing all of that, and I ended up finding one. And so I made my appointment, and I went into my appointment, and that first, initial appointment was like my pap smear and things like that. And, everything looked great. And at that time, like I said, my cycle was still heavy. I was still doing heavy bleeding. I was managing like the cramps, and the clots, but I was still heavy bleeding. And I was a little bit, for some reason, apprehensive with telling, my OBGYN what I was going through. I was a little bit apprehensive, I can remember. And so I remember mentioning it to her right before my doctor's visit was complete. And she told me, she said, well, um this is what we can do, she said. And she said, I can set you up an appointment in a few weeks, and we'll do like a Zoom call kind of appointment, and we can talk about what's going on and things like that, and we can kind of get you back in and come up with a plan. So I said, okay. And so, long story short, what ended up happening, I don't know what ended up happening, but a lot was going on. I ended up missing that appointment that she was talking about. And I ended up not seeing her again until the next year, which was for, my annual pap smear or whatever. Okay. And so when um, and it was time for my annual pap smear or whatever, um, I ended up talking to her about it. And, she immediately told me that she would set me up an appointment where an ultrasound would be done. Okay. And then also blood work um, will be checked to check my iron levels and different things like that. And she explained to me, you know um, in detail, what could be causing a heavy bleeding, and just different things like that. One thing I want to back up and say is what makes me mad, and I'm probably getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I feel like doctors, OBGYNs, specifically, with so many women, black women particularly, dealing with heavy periods that are not normal, heavy bleeding that is not normal. I feel like, in a sense, this is not something that we should bring up in order to achieve um, help for it. I feel like, you go to the doctor and there's brochures everywhere about this, there's brochures everywhere about that, but I never really see this kind of awareness that I'm looking for, that really, like when you come into the office, that's automatically talked about, that you're automatically educated on. Like, if this is happening to you, you know, this is what you should do. This is what you can do. I feel like so many women are dealing with heavy periods and heavy cramps. I hear it all the time. And we literally think it's normal, because I thought it was normal. I didn't think any other way. I just thought this is this is what a period is supposed to feel like. I had no idea that suffering like this, because that's what it feels like. It feels like suffering and turmoil to me. And I feel like to think that that's normal is just not right. So anyway, fast forward. So I think that might have been in like the year of 22, I think, when she scheduled me to have those, or maybe like the end of 21 when she scheduled me to have the ultrasounds and things like that. I have to go back and look at paperwork. I promise to get all those dates out for you guys. But when it was time for me to do the ultrasound, I ended up going in, and what happened first is I did the ultrasound, of my uterus, where they go in and they kind of like, take pictures and stuff like that and look at it. I brought my daughter with me, my 17-year-old. I have two daughters. One of them wasn't available to go, so I brought my youngest daughter with me because I wanted her to be aware um, of different things. To back it up a little bit back, when I did talk to my doctor about the heavy bleeding, and she was just kind of going through, well, how many pads are you going through a day, and just asking me different questions and things like that. And, she kind of laid across what could be going on, and fibroids were one of the things that she mentioned. And for me, I'm going to keep it 100. I never really had heard of fibroids. That's something that I could say that I was not keen on. I had heard about it. Like, I have a sister, a sibling who dealt with fibroids during her pregnancy. That was like one of my, I'm not going to say my first time, but maybe the first time that somebody actually was close to me that was dealing with it. But I still didn't know or grasp or comprehend how serious it was, how deep it was affecting my sister, how deeply it affects women, how deeply it affects women in the Black community. I had saw like a few interviews of some celebrities, women who had dealt with fibroids, Toya Wright, Cynthia Bailey from Housewives. And so, I had kind of saw stories of that, but still didn't really know or have any education on what they were and how they could impact my life, and that they were, the reason for heavy bleeding and excruciating cramping and things of that sort, right? So my doctor had kind of mentioned that there's a possibility that could be that. And so when she said that, I immediately went to praying and, just making affirmations, speaking over myself, all of those type of things. So when I went back in to get my results, or whatever the case was, she told me, she said, okay, so you have fibroids, and immediately my eyes kind of began to swell with tears because we love our bodies, and I never want anything to be wrong with my body. I pride myself on taking care of my body as best as I can, and so that was something I did not want to experience, and I was just praying, that okay, that this will not be the case for me. I don't want anything in my stomach. I don't want to have to deal with this. I just want to find a way to not to coexist with my period. I just want my period and I to be friends, um, and things like that. Just show me how I can feel better, but I wasn't expecting, okay, you have fibroids, because to back it up a little bit, I keep on backing it up, but I'm thinking about things as I go. Like, I remember, one of my sisters, she told me, she said, look, she said, there are things. She went to like a little conference where they were discussing menstruation cycles and things like that. And she was like, that chemicals that are in pads that will cause you to cramp um, more, and so she said, well, you should try these organic. I know this company that sells organic pads, and she introduced me to honey pot pads. I had seen the name a little bit, but like I said, I wasn't associated with it. So when she told me about it, hey, I ran and I started buying those honey pot pads every month, every month, every month. And that first initial time that I purchased honey pot, oh my Lord, I thought that I had just discovered something. I was like, oh my gosh, because it shortened my period. Like my period